We are here again with fortunate Mafeta Phaka from South Africa, and finally today we will finish our interview. So, indeed, as just to refresh your memory, Fortunate is a PhD candidate studying the sort of the relation between people and herpetofauna in a community in some local communities in South Africa. And yeah, the reason why I invited him here was because I've been following his work on social media for a while, and I am intrigued by how he combines human and wildlife aspects of science and wildlife conservation in general for his work. So thank you for being here, Fortunate. Welcome.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Thank you for having me.
So yeah, then like before the internet stabbed us in the back 2 days ago, we were talking about the research that you are conducting for your PhD. So would you please explain to our audience again what exactly it consists of?
So the research looks at how traditional cultures in South Africa relate to frogs and also reptiles, and from the cultural relationships that exist, I want to see if any of them can be used for conservation purposes. Because conservation is mostly done from modern laws and modern cultures, and you get traditional people saying this is kind of exclusive. So this is trying to have a bit more inclusive conservation laws, and also get a sense of the threats that are coming from the cultural side for frog and reptile conservation, because um, what is mostly said is that culture is bad for any wildlife, basically. But as I go through this work, as I do the research, I see that you can sort of put things on a spectrum. On the right hand side, you have consumptive use of wildlife, which is a threat. And then on the other side, you have um, reverence and even worship of reptiles, especially. So that is something that can be used for conservation purposes. And somewhere in the middle, you have people value snakes and crocodiles and frogs because they can eat them. Um, they will not just kill them for fun, but they will use them for food. Um, that that is a conservation challenge, but how it happens is usually it happens seasonally for about 3 months in a year when it's the rainy season and it's the breeding season. That's when those frogs and reptiles get eaten the most, and so the threat there is only seasonal. But you can work with that because they already value the frogs and reptiles because it provides food. You can work with that and say we already have the value. You've already placed value on these, so maybe you can help us with their conservation and their protection. So it's in a nutshell, basically, is trying to look at culture and how we can use culture in conservation.
Oh, that's extremely interesting, and I liked a lot the point that you made that culture is more of a spectrum, not just something that has to be changed for the sake of conservation. So, talking about the various aspects of this spectrum, let's start maybe with cultural practices or beliefs that see these animals as bad, so to say, with a very broad term. So if you encounter some traditions, for example, that portray snakes or frogs or lizards as evil, so how do you what kind of approach do you think would be most sensitive to relate to these traditions in a way that doesn't sound patronizing to the people who believe in them?
So what I try to do is um, learn the origin of whatever it is they're saying. Sometimes it's not so easy to find out how this belief came about, but sometimes it's actually quite easy to find how a belief came about. Like, for example, you'll hear people saying, "We kill frogs because frogs bring snakes into our homes." And when you apply a bit of biology in that, is that um, it's likely that people have seen snakes predate on frogs. And if this happens often and people see it often, it sort of reinforces the belief that um, snakes follow frogs wherever they go. But in that way, once you've found the origin, you can start chatting to people and understand that snakes are actually opportunistic hunters. They will catch whatever they find, provided it's on their menu. They don't just wake up in the morning and say, okay, we're going to search for those frogs again. Um, and usually, how I approach people is I don't go there with lessons already planned. I just go there with blank pages and go to people and like I want to learn what you see in frogs. I want to learn what you see in reptiles. And once they teach me what they know, I can use that to work with them because already I've shown them respect by saying teach me, and now when it's time for me to teach them, it's um, it's a lot easier because I firstly I didn't presume I was smarter than them. I just wanted to learn their culture, and I try as much as possible to speak in their language, which people really appreciate. And yeah, once I know the origin and I can apply biology to it and show people the biological side of it, it works a lot of the times. You see people starting to warm up to frogs when they, for instance, understand that no, a frog won't give you warts on your skin because those things on a frog's skin are not warts to start with. That glands used for multiple purposes. So it's basically learning, showing them respect, and after learning from them, I share what I know, and from there we sort of build a relationship, and slowly but surely the perceptions change.
Yeah, so thank you for mentioning it, because yeah, I think one of the big problems in like academic conservation, so to say, is that scientists often come to go to local communities, and they already have like a prepared plans and such, and they their attitude says, okay, now I will tell you what you have to do. And this then, and of course people don't like that, because they don't like to be dictated from by someone who doesn't belong to their community. So have you experienced something like this from colleagues or other personalities in the academic world, with respect to the communities you work in, like a more of a like let's say colonial-ish attitude in that sense?
I think that's the general approach to community engagement. You often hear a lot of people would say, um, let's raise awareness, let's teach them. I'm like, no, what do you mean? Let's teach them. They know. They just don't know from your perspective. They know from their perspective, and it's a bit like when you prepare lessons or you write books for educational purposes. You don't just write one life sciences book for primary school until PhD classes. No, you cater the book according to the level of education and the context that you are teaching in. So why can't we do that with communities? Why do we want to have a blanket lesson for every community? instead of creating lessons based on communities. And so yeah, basically it's the general approach is let's teach them, let's raise awareness, and we will um, we will change their mindsets. And a lot of times it doesn't work. People resent that because these are tight knit communities, and when you come in, firstly you're an outsider. No, you're an outsider. You want to teach people. How's that gonna work? So what you should do is first gain acceptance. Then once you gain acceptance, show respect. Then after showing respect, they will give you that respect, and that's when whatever interventions you wanna work with, you can start working with.
Yeah, and then another, I think another big prejudice that that the at least the mainstream conservation narrative has is that people are always bad for nature, and that any human impact on nature is the by itself destructive. But that, like you said, it's a spectrum. So you also mentioned that people have some beliefs and some traditions actually work towards protecting nature. So they people protect, conserve wildlife and conserve natural habitats because of their traditional values. So, could you give us maybe some examples of that from your study sites?
Okay. So I think the at the very top of the spectrum is there's a belief of a water snake. Um, this is an all-powerful water snake. It should not be angered. If it is angered, there's heavy rain, there's flooding, there's people's homes getting destroyed. And what happens there is usually once they say that water body over there is inhabited by the snake, people respect that water body and that ecosystem remains pristine. And people who go there are usually people with a calling to be traditional healers, because that snake is also believed to mentor very special traditional healers, and it takes them underwater for a couple of months, and it teaches them, and after that, when they emerge as very strong traditional healers. I mean, from a biological perspective, this seems unbelievable. But the thing is, do we embrace the value that it has for protection, or do we tell people your belief is rubbish? Um, so I'm taking the route of embracing the protection value that it has. And after that giant water snake, there's you have monitor lizards, you have some frogs, you have the southern African python, and what else is there? The gecko as well. Those are considered when you see them in your home. A lot of cultures consider them to be a visit from the ancestors, and when ancestors visit you, it means they're happy with you and you'll have lots of good fortune. So usually they just let them be. And another one, it's the mole snake. There's a culture, it's called Amampondomise. Um, they call it the Majola snake. It's their totem. They consider that snake part of their kingship, and usually when they see it around the house, they give it offerings, and some people will even go as far as just piling up wood on the side of the house for the snake to live there, and that wood does not get used for firewood. It's the snake's home, and they they are so comfortable with the snake, even with the newborn child. They say the snake will come and greet the unborn child, so they will not protect the unborn child from the snake. Luckily, it's a non-venomous snake, so um, there's little risk. Although the snake does have a nasty bite, but there is very little risk of any human fatalities there. And as you come down the scale of protection, you have usually farming communities that see snakes in general and leopard tortoises and southern African rock pythons as signs of rain or a sign that the harvesting season is about to start. So usually when it's the rainy season, those reptiles start becoming active, and the farmers know, okay, it's almost time to start planting. And um, from a biological perspective, it makes sense because it's the onset of breeding season, and it's also the onset of growing season for their prey items. So it makes sense for them to be very active. Without the biological knowledge, it just seems like those reptiles are bringing in the rainy season and they're bringing in um, the harvesting season. If you observe the same thing one like very often without the background biological knowledge, then you sort of try to make sense of the observations with whatever knowledge you have. And from a conservation perspective, that is actually really good because it affords those reptiles protection when they are most active. So something like that you can work with and try to reinforce and protect, especially the endangered tortoises that we have.
Oh yeah, thank you for thank you for saying this, because yeah, again, this is it once again made me realize there is so much that we as outsiders, as talking of course not with respect to you, but more talking about myself, as outsiders, that we have no idea about, even when dealing with animals that we think we know. Like I study snakes, but I didn't know anything of what you just said about how people what their relation to snakes is, and also about the life patterns of the animals itself, which these people know because they see it like every day under their own eyes. So this is something that we as scientists should always keep in mind, because in the end there is always again, like you said, it's all about perspective. It's not that they don't know, it's just they have a different perspective, which is in no way less valuable. So we have an interesting comment from David in the chat. He says that I wonder if the animal behavior, which will vary a lot with climate factors, means they are better predictors of, for instance, optimal hunting time than would be a fixed date for a hypothetical hunting season.
Uh, yeah, he is correct because the physiology of the animal is what compels them to act the way they act, and in that way they are predictors of the onset of hunting season and growing season, and um, in the rainy season. But once again, we know it because we study biology, but they will try to make sense of it using the available um, knowledge. And just to add on that, I think my favorite one is that um, these little tiny frogs called grass frogs. They call them the rainmakers because usually, like just a few minutes before rain, you'll see the grass frogs starting to be active. And if you see that a couple of times, you're like, okay, 5 minutes before the rain, I saw this frog, and I saw it 10 times after that. So it must be that this frog brings rain, and it's just the frog's physiology responding to optimal conditions for um, looking for new breeding sites, and human observation connects that to onset of rain, and there you have it. You have the rain-making frogs.
Oh yeah, that's yeah, indeed. That makes perfect sense. So yeah, indeed, David, you were right. You were totally right about that. And so another thing that I wanted to discuss with you, Fortunate, is relates to the field guide that you wrote, a bilingual guide to the frogs of Zululand, which is indeed a book comprising all the frog species that are native to the Zululand region in South Africa. And again, you call it a bilingual guide because indeed it is both in English and in isiZulu. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, which is the indigenous language spoken in the one of the indigenous languages spoken in the area. And so, how exclusionary do you think is normally the nature world towards even native people? Because again, field guides are mostly written in like Western languages, like in English or French or German. So, do you think how big do you think is the gap between the sort of mainstream nature industry and local people, at least in South Africa?
It's very big. I mean, South Africa is well known for its wildlife field guides, and in many of those field guides, almost all, um, there isn't even a mention of a local name. Um, I think before my book, there was a colleague who brought out a children's book in just a small introduction to frogs of South Africa, and for me, that's the first time I've seen frogs written in any of the indigenous languages. So it's very it's incredibly exclusionary, but it's not surprising because language development is mostly focused on English and Afrikaans. And now you have a university in KZN, the University of KZN, which is doing a lot of work to develop isiZulu, which made writing that book a lot easier because there's already the vocabulary um, existing for technical terms that you use in biology. So just to sum up the answer, it's very exclusionary. There's less than like how do I even like more than 90% of all the wildlife guides um, are in English and Afrikaans. Um, there is, I think, I'd say for now, like from what I know, it's only my book and the other colleagues' book that have written any wildlife guide in an indigenous language, which just gives you a sense of how exclusionary it is, considering that South Africa is well known for its wildlife guides.
Yeah, and I think this ties back to some discussions I've heard a lot in the herpetological community, so to say, about like how people bashing the use of common names because common names are not systematic. They change they are too variable, and so they have no scientific accuracy. But again, I mean, like just to use perhaps a stupid example, if someone is bitten by a black mamba, like they're not going to say to tell to the doctor, "Oh yeah, I was bitten by a Dendroaspis polylepis." Like that's definitely not how it works. Like people who actually not everyone is a scientist, so we can't expect everyone to know the Latin name of an animal. Even in fieldwork situations where you have to
Yeah.
relate to local people, they will know the animals by the common names that they use. So again, what did you encounter resistance from the academic sector when it comes to like the language barriers and the use of common names?
Yeah, you always have those gatekeepers of science, people who believe science should be done their way and no other way. I think the most well, I say it's the funniest, but it's actually the most outrageous claim was that I was trying to replace scientific taxonomy with my Sizulu taxonomy, and which can never happen. Um, but just to stoke the fire a bit, um, scientific names have this what do they call it? I think it's called the principle of seniority, or
Oh yeah,
basically
the
scientific
principle of
names.
priority. Yeah.
Yeah, you use the name that existed first. So how do we know? Likely for the gatekeepers of science, these traditional names are not recorded anywhere. Because if they were recorded anywhere, then we could sort of make a case that, oh look, this Zulu name is actually first. So you know what should happen actually? We should replace Pixocephalus with Ixoxo.
Oh, that's a great point actually. So, yeah, that's a great
But
point.
no,
Where
what I usually tell them is that no, the same way you try to standardize English names and Afrikaans names to make communication better with people that don't know scientific names, this is what I'm doing. Because usually um, English is not the first language for most of South Africa. And what happens when you need to discuss frogs with people? Firstly, they don't know scientific names, they don't know English names, they don't know Afrikaans names. So let's document your names and let's use your names. And in the process, let's get you on board with our conservation movement.
yeah, in your face nomenclaturists. No, I mean, of course, like taxonomy. Of course, like yeah, the taxonomy is important and all that. It's just yeah, it's just not the only thing to keep in mind when talking about how to classify animals for sure. And again, I also really appreciate the communication work that you do on social media. For instance, with your Wild Vernac page, which is basically which I recommend everyone to follow on Instagram, where Fortunate presents several animals and addresses them by both the common English names and the local names in native indigenous South African languages, and also you highlight their role in again tradition and culture for local people before South Africa was since before South Africa was colonized. So that is definitely eye opening and very funny sometimes, because yeah, some of the things that of the facts that you bring forwards definitely made me laugh a couple of times. I must admit. So again, in this sense, so again, considering you said that South Africa is famous for its wildlife, because yeah, we've all watched documentaries about Kruger National Park or the Drakensberg Mountains, so we all know there's lions, elephants, giraffes, rhinos, and all that. But again, so the image that comes of South Africa, and perhaps of Africa in general, that comes to the eyes um, of foreigners who only see it through documentary, is of a land where basically people don't exist, because yeah,
Yeah.
you never because you only see like supposedly pristine habitats and wildlife all over the place, but then yeah, that there is a complete neglect for the human dimension of these places. So oh, nice, cute dog.
Naughty
So
dog.
so again, do you think that to what extent do you think like tourists coming to South Africa are influenced by this inaccurate representation of the country?
I mean, it's that's what they expect. They expect Coco. They expect wildlife to be roaming free, um, and that is that is not how it works. I mean, they expect people to be living alongside all this wildlife happily, and no, there is human wildlife conflict in South Africa also, and we do have high-rise buildings, um, we do have expensive cities, but it creates this um, like sense of Wakanda. Like when you come to South Africa, you're just walking into Wakanda or something like that. But it also sort of hides our conservation problems. It hides how 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 conservation excludes a lot of people. It hides how conservation is like done from a profit perspective. I understand that um, conservation needs money, but when conservation is approached from a profit perspective, then it sort of creates problems. And so that's, I mean, when you try to get people involved, like foreign nationals involved in conservation, then you hear a lot of stories, and some of them not so safe. I remember one lady asked me if she could jump out and pet that lion. I was like,
Oh my God. Okay.
you
Yeah.
cannot do that. But if the people are open-minded, then within a couple of days, they sort of start to understand that, oh no, the pretty pictures that you see on Net Geo are not as pretty. There's actually just a fence um, behind that elephant that they don't show on Net Geo, and people on that side of the fence are not happy because um, for instance, the nature reserve relocated them forcefully 100 years ago. So it's a lot of stuff like that, like lot of fights that you would never know about unless you are in the country.
Oh yeah, I can imagine there's also a lot of pointing fingers towards like local communities when, for example, yeah, like you mentioned human wildlife conflict, like conflict with big predators like lions or leopards, and as soon as you hear of a lion being killed in be it in South Africa or in Botswana or in Zambia or whenever, everyone here on the internet like goes berserk. They say, how could they do that? They're so evil. Why did they kill the animal? And then, but again, like when you live in close contact with lions, like I mean, they can be a real danger. So that's again that's
Yeah,
something a highly biased perspective.
yeah. I mean, we've sort of dehumanized conservation. I mean, you get people like they would um, celebrate the death of a poacher, to give you an example. Um, I mean, the guy is dead, it means he won't be poaching anymore. But here you are celebrating the death of a poacher, and then in a couple of hours, you want to go back to the poachers community and try to um, get them to join your conservation movement because it's firstly, I say your conservation movement because the conservation movement was created somewhere remotely and just um, exported to the rural community. And so you've shown disregard for human life, firstly, and now you go back to those people and try to sell them conservation and say, no, conservation is for your benefit after showing this disregard um, for human life. So it sort of um, stops people jumping into the conservation movement the way we want them to jump in, because it's our fault we are not communicating conservation how we should be. Um, and you get big corporates. They usually say when they come in and say, will bring 1,000 jobs with this project. If you stand by, if you back our project, then you get 1,000 jobs. And what they're doing, even though they're lying, what they're doing is they're very good at communication, and they're very good at destruction of the environment. We are really good at protection of the environment, but really bad at communication. So people usually just go with the people that know how to speak to other people.
And I'm glad that you mentioned the case about poachers, because yeah, I mean, in all honesty, I have to admit, I used to be that kind of to have that kind of reaction until like a couple of years ago, like when I read of a poacher being up killed by animals or by rangers. I was relieved and saying, yes, finally this person will never hurt wildlife again. But then, yeah, then you start thinking, yeah, what if this person was poaching because they literally had no other means to provide for their family? So it's not like they necessarily hate the animals or anything. It's just that when you live in situations of poverty, then you will stop at nothing to survive and to protect the people you love. So and if that involves killing animals, then how can you blame them for that?
Yeah, and a lot of our nature reserves are in rural areas, are in the poorest of areas in South Africa with very high unemployment. On top of that, people's grandparents were forcefully removed to make that nature reserve. And when you hire people, you don't hire local people. So there's a lot of resentment towards that nature reserve. And now what happens is someone's brother went into there trying to make money to feed their family, and now you've killed them, and now you're celebrating their death. And um, in a couple of days, you want me to sign up for your conservation cause. No, it's not gonna happen. Someone used to say that um, conservation is currently done from inside the reserve, like from the inside out, when it should be done from outside inward. So basically, we're saying conserve the nature reserve from outside. Work with the community, and the community will protect the nature reserve for you. That's what he was saying.
Oh yeah, that yeah indeed that's something that is definitely something that although yeah I think at least there is some progress in that sense. That is still something that a lot of people have never even thought of, because again, like the what you hear from WWF or other big like conservation organizations is mostly indeed the old paradigm of like, yeah, the animals are in danger, we need to create fortress protected areas to save them, and so on. So this is definitely something that that should that should change. Like times are right for that to change. So hopefully we will see improvements in the next few years, also thanks to the work of people like you, like on site on the ground. And in conservation terms, I was curious about something else, because like at least like big charismatic animals like elephants or rhinos, they are very popular. So everyone wants to save them, wants to donate money to protect them. But then like you and I both work with herbs, with reptiles, and also amphibians in your case. And let's be honest, people, at least people here, don't care much about them. So no one will like make donations to projects that is about saving snakes or saving salamanders or you name it. So how is in how is the conservation environment, conservation like community in South Africa dealing with issues like that? So, is there like a let's say sensibility about these like neglected animals, or is it only about the megafauna?
It's mostly focused on the big five, the charismatic Coco Tamaya. Focused on the charismatic species, and luckily there's change. I think you and I are lucky to be working on these less likable animals
Oh, absolutely.
in this current social climate. I mean, what's happening now is people are saying no to the norm. People are always looking for disruption. If this is the normal way of doing things, then people want to do something different. They are tired of doing the same old thing. And in there, that brings us a rise in ecotourism because now people are saying, "Oh, I don't want to see the charismatic megafauna. Show me the little things. Um, show me show me the little things and throw in a bit of culture in there, and I'll give you my money." And there's a lot of change. It's slow change, but it's encouraging. I mean, one of the biggest NGOs we have in South Africa currently, conservation NGOs, have a dedicated amphibian protection program, which sort of gives you a sense that things are moving in the direction because that NGO is involved with a lot of creating legislation. They work closely with the government, and I think their biggest achievement so far is a breeding project of the endangered Pickersgill reed frog. I think the last update was that they've reintroduced about 800 um, hatchlings or metamorphs of these little frogs, critically endangered frogs. And the nice thing about that is these were reared in a zoo, which zoo you usually go there to see elephants and giraffe, but this zoo people actually it's now known for breeding those small critical endangered frogs. So there is change, and I'm very thankful to the many social movements that you see these days that are sort of anti-exclusion. They are anti any discrimination, so they want everything and everyone included, and that counts in our favor. It'll take a couple of years. I think by the time it catches on, you and I will be old people retired, and our kids will be the ones um, earning all the rewards of what's happening currently.
Oh yeah, but still, that's great news. That's definitely great news to hear. And yeah, it gives hope at least that even this like long-standing disregard for neglected animals will fade away with time. And so on this line, I mean, you for instance, like one of the questions that people might be asking is like, why should I care about frogs or about about the little things like yeah, again, frogs, lizards, and such. So what would be your answer to that regarding based on your own study species in South Africa, but also maybe in general?
I think a lot of the times the smaller animals um quickly give us a sense of the health of the environment, which which comes back to us because healthy environments mean clean air for us and mean cleaner water. So what happens then is that if these ecosystems are good, then purifying water for our consumption becomes cheaper, and that translates to buying water a lot cheaper than we should be paying for currently. Um, so there's that. There's health of ecosystems, which is always the one that I lead with, um, and also I mean the environment is so complex and so connected that um, we who's to say that if the little things disappear, all your big megafauna are going to continue being around. So we have to Coco Tamaya. So we have to constantly keep thinking about how everything is connected. Yes, we can protect the elephants, but who's to say that if all the snakes and reptiles and amphibians are gone, the elephant will be able to live peacefully and prosper. We think that if the smaller things disappear, that's like the general thinking. If the smaller things disappear, then ecosystems will collapse because of trophic levels and food webs. Um, we don't know it for sure. That's what we think, and we this is one science experiment that you don't want proof for. You just want to um, hypothesize, but you don't really want proof for it. Like, no, I think this is going to happen, but I don't want to test it. Let's just leave it at that.
Oh yeah, no, that's definitely not something not something I want to see. Although sadly, like especially amphibians are as a whole are extremely vulnerable to habitat disturbance and yeah other disruptive factors like disease and pollution, habitat destruction. So in that sense, do you think that amphibians could serve as like ideal, maybe in this case flagship species would not be the correct term, but at least as model animals to show like how much human impacts can affect the environment?
I think they can, especially the more sensitive ones. Um, Not like the guttural toads that you see in every house. Those are like the cockroaches of the amphibian world. Those things are indestructible. um, but certainly with the more sensitive amphibians, yes, they can tell us what is happening with our water ecosystems. I mean, if you, for instance, you know in this area I should be expecting to see 50 species of frogs, but every year when I do monitoring I only find five, then it's a good idea to start testing the water. And because frogs don't only live in water, they also use the soil. You should also consider testing the soil and see why frogs, which are very sensitive, why they've disappeared so quickly. And a lot of the times you'll find that the water quality um, is really bad. The water could be really toxic, and those five species of frogs that you find, they are the indestructible ones that um, they'll live in a bowl of acid if you give them the chance, basically.
Yeah, so yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, frogs are ideal ecological indicators in that sense, and indeed, I think that's also something that could be that could be stressed out like more by like in conservation organizations and in general academics when in science communication, because yeah we are losing these animals and we might regret it a lot more than we think. So yeah, that's definitely a great point to bring up. Now, for the since we are approaching the end of the interview, if the I would like to remind the audience that if they have any questions for Fortunate, like you can drop them in the comment section, and we will go through them. We will happily go through them, and in the meantime, one last thing that I wanted to bring up is about a discussion that we had on Instagram a while ago about the labels that people give themselves in science, like all the discussion about whether how you should address yourself in the to your peers and such, because I think that also plays a role in the excessive like gatekeeping, perhaps, or at least excessive complexity of academia. So we were saying that yeah, since you we are both biologists, but then again, someone might say that since you specialized on frog, you should refer to yourself as a batracologist, and I am more into the snake venom thing. So should I be an ophiologist or a toxinologist or whatever else? So I what is your take on this matter? Because I think it can become like a never ending cycle of and very unproductive cycle of constantly nitpicking which name is more correct.
Which is actually quite silly. I think everyone just finds scientists as easy targets because if someone says with medical doctors, you say that's a doctor. Usually, when you say someone is a doctor, automatically you think, oh, medical doctor. But like you get to the specialization part when you need to, because they'll say someone is a doctor and then you leave it at that. You don't worry whether they're actually that the dentist or whether he or she is a surgeon or whether they are general practitioners, and we're okay with that. We're okay with just calling them doctors. Why aren't we okay with calling scientists scientists and get to the specifics when we need them to? Um, I'm a scientist. Sure, let's leave it at that. Um, if you need help from me, then you can ask, what type of scientist are you? What do you specialize in? Because that's what we do with doctors, medical doctors. Oh, he's a doctor. Oh, nice to meet you, doctor. And then when you're sick, like, are you a cardiologist? Are you a general practitioner? Um, are you a specialist in oncology? Because you need that help. But with us, the easy targets, we want to know: are you a hepatologist? Are you a really hepatologist, or do you specialize on frogs? Um, Specialize on frogs. Do you specialize on parasites of frogs or just biodiversity of frogs? Like, why do we do that? Even with PhD doctors, we want them to write, instead of write doctor this and that, we want them to write their names and then PhD at the end, and it's to sort of distinguish them from medical doctors. Why? Why do we do that? For me, you only specify when you need to. Um, he's a scientist. Let's leave it at that. If I need to work with a scientist or I need help from a scientist, then I'll start asking, "What's your field of specialty?" And I think it works like that. And a PhD doctor is a doctor. Um, we'll get to the specifics when you have a heart problem and you start asking, "Are you a medical doctor or are you a PhD doctor?"
Yeah, that definitely puts things into perspective there.
Yeah, just get to the specifics when you need the specifics. Don't just bother people because you think scientists are less doctors than medical doctors.
All right, so we we threw our last jab at academic practice, and since I see that there are no more questions, I would like to thank you, heartfeltly fortunate for being here with us today. It was an extremely interesting discussion, and I'm pretty sure our audience learned a lot as well. It was a pleasure to have you here, and of course, we all wish you the best for on your work and on your career.
Thank you, Lorenzo, and keep these coming. I'm enjoying them, and I'm meeting new biologists in my field, and they're incredibly informative. And once again, let me apologize for the internet problems that we had
Oh, don't
the
don't
other day.
worry, don't worry.
Luckily,
Like yeah, as to if you excuse my French, shit happens. So yeah, that's
it does.
so yeah. Absolutely, there will be more episodes of the Snakeman Lair coming up, and the next one will be on April 9th with a truly exceptional guest in the person of world leading paleontologist Jean Mai O'Connor from Chicago. So yeah, tune in if you're interested in paleontology. You absolutely don't want to miss that. And again, thank you to the audience for being here with us today. I hope you enjoyed the talk, and you will be able to find it on YouTube and here on HAPS for in the days to come. And indeed, hopefully I will see you again for the next episode. So have a great day, everyone, and goodbye.
Cheers, Lorenzo.